Welcome to the Author's Edge radio show with Guy L. Freer and Bob Price. Now, their show airs nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each week on their show, they help authors create books that transform our lives and imaginations. Through radio excellence, they create a unique community resource, one that promotes, connects, and fosters a sense of well-being. Gael and Bob maintain a focus on sharing books, publishing, marketing, and writing solutions. They serve listeners by providing outlets for their creative skills and energies, and they help them flourish in the competitive marketplace. Their weekly show provides intros, writing spotlights, helps you in promoting your book, your writing, your publishing, your marketing tidbits, and much more. Okay, audience, here's Gael and Bob.
And Bob.
And Gael. You forgot Gael.
No, he said and Gael.
But you forgot Gael.
Did you shut your phone off? Forget.
Did you shut your phone off? Did you shut your phone off?
Have we been through this before?
Well, last show.
Deja vu?
Last show you had your phone on.
No.
It went off.
I turned it completely
Did you shut it off?
Yes.
I certainly hope so.
Are you going to get the ruler out again?
Yeah. You'd be surprised. Who do we have today?
We have Matt Cheney.
Ah, Matt Cheney.
Tell us about Matt.
Matt Cheney is a Missouri writer and publisher and consultant. Cheney writes for newspapers, magazines, websites, and his own media. He makes guest appearances on radio and television. Remember television?
Yeah. It's disappearing.
It's been a while.
Is it on Firewire?
Cheney is a 1985 journalism graduate at Southeast Missouri State University, and he holds an MA in Media Studies from the University of Central Missouri. Cheney operates his Four Walls publishing company in Warrensburg, Missouri. He has authored 6 books, all nonfiction. His most recent book is River Shows, Blues, Ragtime, Jazz, and Country Music. It all equals rockabilly. Rockabilly. Say that fast 10 times. Some of his previous books include
You've
My
never
Name.
been to Rockabilly before, have you?
No.
No, okay. Well, you have to
My
go there.
Name. His previous books include My Name is Mr. Ryan, 1994, Spiral of Denial, Music Doping in American Muscle Doping.
There's been some music doping going on too.
It's
my
hard being
research shows
dynamic,
that.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Muscle doping.
Musical doping.
Musical doping.
No, that sounds about that.
Hey,
Well,
it's a
stick with
little
that.
variation of the same thing.
Muscle doping.
Muscle doping in American football, 2009. Puxico basketball and run, shoot, run, 2014. And SEMO football player stories and program history, 2022. The latter co-authored with Elliot Shostak.
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 You
All
bet.
right. So what sparked your passion for writing and journalism?
Oh, it really began before I could read and write. I'm sure I was a real early 60s. I was a big fan before kindergarten of storybooks, and my mother and my grandmother read one or the other, or sometimes both, read to me daily. So really started with those, and I still have most of them, pretty beaten up a few, with those little, 19-cent to 29-cent dime store storybooks you'd get, and they were color, and I actually started memorizing those books, and I had a step grandfather who did pretty well at the local county joint on Saturday afternoons, betting people that I could read and stuff, because it worked out real well for him.
Is that like having your pet frog talk?
Yeah, exactly. I was an educated hog, educated pig, like circuses.
And he did well with it.
Oh yeah, he knocked them out. But the real show, this was not some Houdini trick. He'd also set me in at a restaurant, he'd set me up in a high chair, and I'd eat a 16-ounce porterhouse.
16 ounce?
Yeah. I
Oh
needed help
my-
cutting it up, but my teeth knew how to, convert. So, that was all that. It was all involved in there. There was a little bit of show business, I guess, even then. The story,
my
a little bit of a storyteller.
Oh
But
my
no.
goodness.
So I always wanted to just tell stories and be, a storyteller. And then in grade school, I lived in a fascinating town, Charleston, Missouri, which was really at the end of the rockabilly era, 66 to 71. And it probably ended before that, but still most of the great rockabillys were playing around there at that time, except for Elvis and Johnny Cash and Conway Twitty, Harold Jenkins. All the others were still running around, Carl Perkins and Charlie Rich, Narvel Feltz. And I didn't understand that, but there was something going on in this town. I mean, we kids, we competed equally at arts and sports.
All right. So for those folks that don't understand the concept of rockabilly, give us the definition for rockabilly.
It's not the beginning of rock and roll. That's not what it is.
So define it for us.
Rockabilly is a strain, a Delta strain of rock and roll that emerged from the rock and roll. That's clearly, as we understand now, especially, I think most agree, we heard rock and roll as early as 1946 from Hank Williams,
right.
1947 from Fats Domino. Bill Haley, the reformed cowboy yodeler, started singing tremendous rock and roll songs by 1951. Elvis was still in high school. And so Carl Perkins was just getting out of high school.
Okay.
Now, these guys were in Memphis, and they were, the upper Delta area. Carl Perkins was north of Memphis. You had Narvel Feltz in southeast Missouri. You had Harold Jenkins down at Friars Point and Helena. Later, Conway Twitty, Charlie.
They were all playing on that Chitlin circuit.
You betcha. And they were raised on gospel and country music and blues. And that's really the formula. Gospel's kind of left out of this, but everyone.
That was a portion. That was
huge.
Good part of that.
Good portion of it. So yes, the good, and what you call too cowboy jazz, as I really believe, it is not picker country music per se. It is horns. It's Carl Perkins got a drummer that was unheard of. He got a horn player. This is by 1951, running around Jackson, Tennessee. And so, but they were raised on guys like Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. And before that, a guy that's really overlooked, Phil Baxter and the Texas Tommies, tremendous cowboy jazz. And they were huge in the Delta from the 20s up. And that's what is different about Delta music. It's a combination of horns, lead guitar,
horns, lead guitars,
and a big beat. Drums came in by the 50s, and before that, they were slapping the big bass back in the 20s and 30s down there.
And dancing to this.
And dancing, well, that's always the key. That's how they evolved. That's what Carl Perkins said. He goes, and Elvis said it. He goes, rock and roll has been around a while, before I ever so-called recorded it, because it was playing in the honky tonks. You couldn't put it on the radio back in the late 40s, but it was there. Rockabilly, pardon me. And so that's a special strain.
Okay,
offshoot.
So the word rock, where did that word come from?
It's a combination of what you call rockabilly and hillbilly music. Hillbilly music was the first modern country music by definition. And I'm talking modern, I'm talking radio age. It breaks out. Hillbilly music sustained early radio. From the very first, the WDKA broadcast in Pittsburgh of election night, guess what filled the air? Banjo players. That's
what filled the air. Banjo players.
And right so they were there from the beginning. And then you have, I even found a great early radio station, WIAR in Paducah, tremendous. Had Fate Marable's band, had Kentucky, the Kentucky Jazz Band was the first band on, and this was summer of 22, not long after, DKA. So then you have what they call old-fashioned music, and they were already starting to call it hillbilly music by about 1922. And then that became the
Right.
term on radio: hillbilly band, hillbilly stars, hillbilly this and hillbilly that.
And then they kind of went in.
That was Nashville.
Nashville's of sure, but Nashville's getting a lot of credit, and they were 3 years behind Paducah.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, I mean Paducah buried Nashville.
You are the music historian, aren't you?
Well, the other thing about the Grand Ole Opry, sorry to say, recognized. Look it up right now. It'll say what, November 28th, 1925. No, I found the first of show on November 6th with 6,000 people in Ryman Auditorium. And I don't know how they got them in there.
Wow.
So that's wrong too. So it's just what has happened. The electronic search of old newspapers is revising and sometimes outright correcting history and some serious issues. And I got into it first just in football history, especially in injury history. Yeah, that's where I started. I really destroyed all of these stupid talking points of football about safe football. It's been around since the 1890s.
Well, that was what I was going to start to talk about. Your The Spiral of Denial, which was your first book about football and the whole idea of doping in football.
Right.
And can you tell us more about that?
Well, I used anabolic drugs in college football. And if you're going to play football at a higher level, and now, it was in high schools when I was there, but it was really predominant. Muscle doping. This is where you are you are synthetically augmenting your hormones is what you are doing. The anabolic or tissue building hormones and power building hormones. You are synthetically augmenting those. And there's ways now with biotech where they just stimulate hormones and proteins. But the powerful standbys go back to testosterone that was developed in the synthetic testosterone injectable from the 1930s.
And this is the book,
the pills,
right?
Yeah,
we had the Spiral of Denial. Do you have that?
But so that's how that got me into this electronic search, and taught me that and what has happened. Before electronic search, we had literally millions of miles of microfilm.
Right.
Where all these facts, this is not new information that I have. Right. It's uncovered information. It's recovered. It was buried. It was not put together properly ever until we got electronic capability. It was impossible to do until then. There's no human alive. God could not have hardly put this all together without electronic search. Right. And so that's what's happened. And so now it's really revising dates and who did what first or what. I was among the first, really the first in football for drugs and the injuries. And I'm among the first in music to really be ferreting out all this information, because it's not an unlimited resource either.
How long did it take you to get all of the information that you needed for this?
Well, I worked on football, drugs, and injuries for 20 years.
Wow.
Hard.
Wow.
So
what got you started on this?
Well, again, my own experience of using the drugs, and then I had a catastrophic knee injury. I have a paralyzed foot. I turned inside out my right knee and destroyed all the ligaments. Although they were able to patch most of those back together. And I destroyed a peripheral nerve channel. It's not the spinal, it's the peripheral nerve channels or wires, if you want to call them, that run out from the spine. So I cut off the flexor function at the knee, which I have a drop foot. So all my flexor, the input, you just do your flex with your, it's all gone. It's all atrophied and gone. So but I played again, not very well, but the point was, I also knew coming up of two players in my programs who died. One collapsed and died in high school at my high school program of heat stroke.
Mhm.
And then in college, one of my real good friends, Chip Forte from St. Charles High School, Deschênes, great guy, super guy. Spring ball of 1983, we had a scrimmage. He participated in a scrimmage, and at that night he died of cardiac arrest. Now, we don't know for sure if
but
football.
you believe those are all drug related.
No, the cardiac arrest was probably football related, and the heat stroke was football related.
Okay.
Now, the drugs are a lot harder to link in to this day. And although we know that they can increase your soft tissue mass by more than 150%, you can be a natural 200-pounder and weigh 325 pounds. And just look at most of your NFL players, and sorry, they're loaded to the max on this stuff.
Right.
Most college players you see on the starting positions are using these drugs one way or another. Testing is a joke. It's an absolute fallacy. Concussion testing is an absolute fallacy. Now, I won't bore you all with the details, but I've got thousands of files in support of what I'm saying here.
Right.
So anybody wants to
Right.
challenge me, I got the time.
You got the time.
If you got them.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So,
So
but that led to how I was able to do this
Right.
music
Right.
and realize
By realizing that
this information is there.
is available.
And now we can get it
Right.
if you learn how to
Right.
search.
And then you went to then you started doing the basketball.
No, that was the first one there.
Oh, this is the first one?
Yes, I did that the hard way without electronic search. And so now I wouldn't want to go back and test that information because I'll find a lot of errors.
Okay.
From people's recollections, they were honest, they were earnest. We were going off but guess what? Most of the histories that I'm finding out, they were recollections.
Right.
So and so said jazz started here, and there's no citation of of a Buddy Bolden, playing right here at this time.
Right.
Oh, Buddy Bolden was just the first, and then it becomes ingrained. And and then we have our great academics, and I'm one, but we got a lot of puffy academics that like to regurgitate this stuff and not check it out. I've got that problem right now. I've found out that Beale Street, it wasn't named after an obscure military leader. It was named after a cotton trader and slave owner, William M. Beale from New Orleans. Yes.
Oh,
and the Memphis historians are scared to death of me because one of them is even or he made a false statement that I've got him on. He said he had a map. He doesn't have it. It does not exist.
Oh my goodness.
So,
You're listening to the Author's Edge with Gael Freer and Bob Price, coming to you weekly on Saturdays at 10 a.m. KWRH 92.9 and KXOK 102.9 FM, and Monday to Friday 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network. You can also view our latest videos of past shows at authors-edge.com online and download valuable information on marketing and publishing and marketing. Bob, do you have a tidbit or two or three?
I have 5.
Or you have 5. You always have 5. Why? What is it with you in the number 5? Is that a magic number for you?
I just counted everything on my hand, and it was 5.
That was Yogi
you
Berra.
can count up to 5? I'm impressed.
I have to use my foot, but yeah. All right. We wanted to talk about promoting and marketing your books. This was a part of a 47-item list of marketing and promoting your books, which I'll post on our website. But there are 5 ways an author can market themselves. And I first talked about this on our last show. This is the next 5. Make a 90-second book trailer.
Can it be 91 minutes, 91 seconds? Can it be 89 seconds?
You can make it 60 seconds. You can make it 61. You can make it 62.
Okay.
All right. You get the idea?
I get the idea.
All right. But it's fairly simple to do. And you don't have to necessarily be on camera. You can be off camera. But make a book trailer. goes on YouTube, goes on TikTok, goes on Book Talk. But number 2, pay for professional book reviews.
I thought those were no-nos.
No, those
No?
aren't. So
No?
you can pay for I think it's like this San Francisco Examiner, and you can get professional book reviews that Amazon will post. They're
Oh,
separate from the regular reviews, like your reader reviews.
uh-huh.
It really is professional reviews, and they will post those and pay attention to them. Number 3, ask the friends and family, neighbors, and your inner circle to buy the book and post a book review on Amazon. These reviews are just killers. And if you don't have them, you're dead in the water. Get the book reviews going. So, number 4, build a subscriber list by giving a free download or content away. Could be a chapter, could be the first 3 chapters, but make it as a download on your website, and have them give you an email in order to download it. It's real simple, but it really creates this book list that you want to get going. The other is create a webinar. So
Aren't those hard to create?
no.
Why not?
Well,
I mean, I always thought they would be difficult to create.
no, it's simply, in other words, plan it out so that you know that you're going to do it. It doesn't have to be a 60-minute webinar. It can be a 30-minute webinar, but it can be about your book and about you. And
And where would you put it?
you are on YouTube. You can promote it on Facebook. You can do it as a, really, the way that it is now, you can make it like on demand, so that when people see it, once you post it on Facebook, then they can get it and listen to it at any time.
Oh,
So it doesn't have to be a live webinar.
oh, okay.
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's my 5 tips. And you can find those at author-edge.com. And we'll have those up this week.
Okay.
And we were talking about your book. And your current book is River Shows, Blues, Ragtime Blues, and Country Music. It all equals rockabilly. Part 1 of the quote you wanted to share is American music rang out a century ago in raw landscape, flooding delta bottoms of the lower Mississippi Valley with jazz, blues, gospel, and hillbilly songs. Here are generations of American song and dance. A synergy drove Delta songs form the flatboats onward, inspired of rivers and people. Wow, sparking native styles, producing pure American melodies. You know, there is something special about the Mississippi River and what it has done, shaped literature, music throughout this land.
I think great point, Bob. And I think the easiest way to explain it is definitely, of course, westward expansion that began by the turn of the 19th century, by 1800. But we have documented evidence, for instance, in the music set of troupe actors, which then were also musicians, actors and musicians setting out from Albany, New York, and cutting across upstate New York and hooking into the Allegheny River, floating down to Pittsburgh, hooking in there with the Ohio, and coming on down. And one of the first was St. Louis, historic St. Louis figure, Noah Ludlam, who probably, again, you don't know, there's the first. I'm a little leery of superlatives, the first and the original and the greatest and the. Yeah. I like that one of the, you qualified as one of, but he has the first known floating theater on the Mississippi River. And he became a St. Louisan. He's buried here, and I think Bellefontaine neighbors. And
we're going to pick up in a moment.
Oh, pardon me.
Because we're going to take a slight break, and we'll be right back. But hold that thought.
All right, we'll do.
El Potro Restaurant and Market, located at 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland, offers the finest variety of Mexican and Central American groceries and goods. El Potro Restaurant serves authentic Mexican and Central American cuisine, including daily specials, not to mention the best horchata and tastiest margaritas in St. Louis. Open 7 days a week. El Potro, 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland.
The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page.
Okay, we are back, and we are talking to Matt Cheney about his rockabilly. Did I say that right?
Rockabilly, you got it.
Rockabilly. Okay.
I bet you can't dance either.
Oh, I can dance, honey.
Okay.
Ask my hubby about my dancing.
Really?
Oh, I can dance.
Now, Elvis did it on his tiptoes, though.
Yeah.
So
Well, no,
that's,
I did, but I do
that's
it in
his own
pumps.
rumba.
Can you dance in pumps?
I do too.
I don't want to see that.
What prompted you to write this book?
Well, it really goes back to my childhood in Charleston. It's really now, I don't know about epiphanies in my life. But I liked the line of the Eagles song, and they didn't make the line up. It just show it. You live your life in moments.
Yes.
And I don't realize that until I'm able to look back years later and you see
That was a moment.
those directions. And Charleston was a very important place. And so that started it, got involved. The thing about Charleston as kids, we were loaded with talent, and my father helped integrate the school system. We were integrating the Charleston schools. And so there was a lot of drama, It was, I'd tell you, I'm sorry, other people have a different perspective, but to me, it was overwhelmingly positive. But there were certainly bad things going on.
Mm-hmm.
But that's life. I'm sorry, that's life. People aren't perfect.
Right.
And it's real easy for so-called historians, to sit back and talk about how things should have been done.
Mhm.
They weren't there.
Yeah.
So
20/20
anyway,
vision. It's hindsight.
but it was a great period in many aspects. And in Charleston, it was an amazing place. As soon as you thought maybe you could write the best poem, or you could catch a ball better, or you could do a better dance, some kid would show up and put you in the dirt, eat peanuts off your head. And you didn't even know where this kid came from. I mean, you didn't even know him yet, or
Right.
her. And so we competed at everything, and mostly in good ways in sports, but equally in the arts. That's what amazes me now. And as I say later on, I realize this, but I thought every town was like this place, but we had great arts at the school down to first grade. We drew, we did plays, we sang, we played records and dance at recess, and competed at this. And then sometimes we may go out and play a game, or, but like I said, it was really an equal, at least in my perspective. And my mom was a singer, and we were, and my father was a big arts promoter as an educator. So maybe I was immersed in that side a little more than a lot of kids.
Mhm.
But later on, when I moved away, even up into the St. Louis area, not exactly the city, I never experienced that again. It was sports. And that's what I learned to be a ball bouncer. I learned how to really catch a ball. I learned how to really throw a ball. I learned how to knock the crap out of people when I tackled them. But I wish I'd been playing the guitar the whole time.
Ah.
And I even see in American history now, I really see a shift from World War I forward. Team sports reached down into the grassroots levels. Team sports were always around after the Civil War, but they were largely adults, and there were the prep academies had them, but not most schools. Most schools did not have sports until the early 1900s.
Yes.
What they had was the arts, and it was huge. And so that's kind of, I see a shift after even World War II where sports really took over. Yeah, and I'm telling you, sports are a creative expression. I'm not belittling them.
No, I
think it's.
But we need to focus.
We've lost something. We have lost something because, and our kids love the arts. They love it. They love it, but they don't have the education in it. They don't have. The focus
is no longer there.
It's just not there, and it's just sports is everything. We have lost a lot. So that's what I see. And Charles was not like that, at least then. When I was in grade school, and the Mississippi River, of course, is close by, as we were talking earlier, and the circuses, American circus, what had happened? The rivers were the first big avenue, really. West of New York.
Part of this is you identify Cairo, Illinois.
Yes, you bet.
At the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio River.
Yes.
As an incubator for American entertainment prior to the Civil War. What were the early river shows of Cairo, Illinois, and how big was this place?
Great question. The Cairo peaked at its max around 1900. In the township area, from the city limit proper into the immediate areas, of around 20,000 people. Now
that would be big.
It was a good sized town. And what was fascinating, by the 1870s, there were 250,000 people visiting there every week, traveling through there.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Let me get this straight. No, pardon me. 250,000 a year. Pardon me. Around 5,000 to 6,000 a week transients in river boats first, and then the railroads, of course. And see, Cairo really started declining when automobiles came in and took over, and Highway 61 was not routed through Cairo. And then there was a big railroad bridge built at Thebes, Illinois. They didn't put it in Cairo. That was 1903. But in the 1880s, you had to go through Cairo. I mean, everyone went through Cairo if they went west. You had it's phenomenal. You'll never know the
Importance of the city.
Yes, importance of the city. And of course, the Civil War established it. The Union Army went in there and created the levees and pump system that really preserves the town to this day, or it would be swallowed up or flooded most of the time.
Right.
And so, but
that's all of Southeast Missouri.
You bet, exactly. It's same story.
Right.
So, what you had at Carroll, though, in the late 1800s, you had everyone basically. I mean, Cecil B. DeMille played in that town in 1913, with a traveling troupe. Yes.
Wow.
I mean, it's so crazy. Buffalo Bill, Annie Oakley, the great song and dance troops, all the great song and dance troops of the 1800s. You had the great African-American professional entertainers who had been freed, although some were free persons before the war, but you had the professional open market for African-American entertainers after the Civil War, and they just took over, and they were predominant in the Mississippi River Valley, especially Carroll, Illinois.
Well, explain this St. Louis, Memphis connection or linkage,
the synergies,
to the early music and shows.
St. Louis was the northern outpost of the South. I'd say is a way to say it. You get a little farther up, and you'll get into Rock Island and what we call the Quad Cities now, and farther. But St. Louis, as we well know, had a lot of Southern culture and sentiment.
Blues and
huge. Well, jazz, jazz. And so in the late 1800s, you basically have this current of music creation that's running really strong between New Orleans and St. Louis. And so then you have a town like Carroll, and the critics even went in, the music analysts, some great ones, and now one or two had some really outstanding studies in the mid 20th century, and their names escape me, but they identified Carroll. They said, this is not a Chicago town. This is a different entertainment culture. This is a culture. And if I could say Carroll was closer to a city, it would be New Orleans than St. Louis, perhaps, in terms of its attitude, its influences. But still, St. Louis was just connected at the hip to Carroll, Illinois, for obvious reasons, beginning with the river and then the railroads, and we're still in the late 1800s. It's
an interesting part of history because you wouldn't recognize Carroll, Illinois today.
No, you wouldn't.
It's gone.
You wouldn't. It's an American ruin, and it's a sad, the decline again. The population declined. The city peaked. I think it was around 1920 at 15,000 people, and has dropped. Now I believe it's now under 2,000. It has ebbed under 2,000. There are still some good people there. I've been there, and they communicate with me online, and man, they want to, and they're glad. A lot of them are glad I've come along with these stories. They have pride. They know this place had big things happen. They know it was a special place.
Yeah.
And and now I'm helping shed a little light on what that really means.
Well, this book is doing that.
Well, yeah, Carroll is huge in this book.
Yeah,
and there's no denying it. But I just, the information takes you there. It takes you there.
During the Civil War, you mentioned that President Abraham Lincoln proclaimed emancipation for millions of slaves, and Union victory in 1865 ensured their freedom. How did freed Afro-Americans influence Southern music, and how did that Afro-Americans everywhere, North and South, push the evolving American melodies of blues, gospel, ragtime, jazz, and country music? This music is in the latter 1800s, leading into the 20th century. How'd that work?
Well, I think the credible analysts have it right. Those are historians that are gone now. These are people. For instance, I have 35,000 annotated files on music that I've put together in the last 6 years. And so that's anything from an advertisement up to a full nonfiction book. So I have 30,000 plus docs. So I've got a pretty good idea of the review of literature, as you would call it.
Right.
And I understand the historians that had it right, and I certainly understand the so-called historians that really screwed it up. And the consensus is there's no other single most element to impact American music than emancipation of the slaves, some 4 million, that was finalized with Union victory in 1865. And they were able to then enter the professional ranks unfettered, although, of course, there were still blocks. But I tell you what, entertainment is business.
Yes.
It's
It
not, and we
absolutely
have seen entertainment try to be political recently, and it didn't work out real well for it.
No.
So why did we have, for instance, white minstrels in blackface? I don't really think it was to denigrate a race. It ended up that way by many of the comedians, unfortunately. It was because the white audiences wanted African entertainment, African
Yes.
descent entertainment.
And we should have stuck to that.
They wanted the songs, they wanted the performers. And when they were emancipated, the gates opened. Billy Cursons in 1880 was paid $100,000 a year. He was African American. He may have been the top paid entertainer in America in 1880.
Wow. That is really
Billy
impressive.
Cursons, look him up.
All right. Ragtime was the first published American music beginning in the 1890s. How was St. Louis involved? Ragtime pioneers flourished in the city before the arrival of Scott Joplin from Sedalia. Absolutely.
You know, there's one that I've tried, a great St. Louis pianist, Louis Chauvin, CHAUVIN, and I may be Chauvin, 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 Louis Chauvin, African American genius, apparently. Died, I think, a little young. I'm not sure exactly. I think he was gone by the 20s. But by early 1890s, he and another gentleman, African American pianist, club owner Tom Turpin, they were tearing it up. They were tearing it up here. Ragtime was their domain. And Tom Turpin even has some printed, before Scott Joplin. Scott Joplin is credited, and rightly so, because he was the genius to put it in writing for the first time with the Maple Leaf Rag in 1899 at Sedalia, Missouri. And he was working for a white man out there. That's near where I live. A white pianist publisher named John L. Stark. And so John L. Stark recognized, obviously, all the great African-American music that was going on in Sedalia. And man, I won't even go there, man. You talking about music too, music history, because that's on the main line out of Kansas City, main railroad line out of Kansas City. Right. So Scott Joplin, he's a Texan and was reared mostly, I think, at Texarkana. But I may have that wrong, but I know he was Oklahoma for a while, but he winds his way into Missouri, ends up at Sedalia in the 1890s, and is a star at the Maple Leaf Club, which is still the site of the Maple Leaf Club is still there on East Main in Sedalia. Right. And they've got it properly marked now. It's a beautiful little park. But that was the Maple Leaf Club, and that was incorporated by African Americans. And that's the famous song, Maple Leaf Rag, to become the first published, printed, replicable piece of music. You could send it worldwide, and a piano master could figure it out. He could be any, and that is what we have as the evidence of the first pure American music, as we'll call it. This is an American melody. Doesn't have the old world ballads. It's all American imagery. It's American settings. It's American music. And so ragtime, by my estimation, and I'm just going by the musicologist. I am not a musicologist. Right. But they've proven it to me. Ragtime is the first documented American music.
You are the authority in music history here on the Mississippi Delta. Nobody's
gonna
going
beat you
to.
on
I'll
that.
tackle him. I'll
Nobody's gonna
tackle him.
dispute
Yeah,
that.
you can tackle them too. You can tackle them.
I'll get my helmet on.
Well,
Right.
that's the reason you should pick up this book.
Yeah.
Well, thank
absolutely.
you, Bob. Thank you.
You tout your newspaper evidence of early American music, reports it ads and features in the 1800s by papers large and small, up and down the Mississippi Valley. What do the old newspapers say about the evolution of jazz music
That's
into such a force of the 1920s?
That's
What
a
did
great
they
question.
say?
Well, they say that the historians don't have it exact either. You know, everybody likes to say, well, New Orleans is the birthplace of jazz and Memphis is the birthplace of jazz. No, I'm telling you,
What is the birthplace of jazz?
to me, it's America. And it was in New York by the time they were doing it. And it's called syncopation of horns, and it's really kind of a ragtime. It's an overlay, but it's different. It's not a marrying melodies. You have you have fills, improvise.
It was in the air.
In the air. And great point. To me, music is it's an innovation, and I've seen this in other things. I've seen it in sports. I've seen where so and so created the fast break. No, he didn't. I found that out. No, it's an innovation ready to happen.
It's in the air. It happens in philosophy.
Yes,
it happens in schools of thought. It happens.
It's
in
a convergence.
Books.
It convergence.
Happens in a lot of variety of places. It's in the air,
and that's
it's the moment it's supposed to happen is when it happens.
Well, what's interesting, I'll say, gosh, jazz has to be New Orleans. It has to. If not that, it's got to be Memphis. Well, W.C. Handy was playing jazz improvisation, and he was playing ragtime in Rock Island, Illinois, before he ever went to Memphis. Okay.
Okay.
W.C. Handy played the Tri-Cities, which then was Moline, Davenport, and Rock Island. Now we have Bettendorf moved in there, but they used to call it the Tri-Cities. And he broke out with Mahara's Minstrels in 1896 and 97. And his mission was to lead ragtime pop as a band leader. And he discovered his own. He was doing it, but he just actually realized what he was doing. He realized that he was becoming a jazz player, although he didn't even know the word at that time.
Right.
But it wasn't just overlay coordination, left hand, right hand of ragtime. It was flurries and improvisations. It was fills. And he started creating fills for certain soloists, including himself on trumpet. And they blew out the house. W.C. Handy, it's in the paper, although they don't identify him. They don't know who he is, but this is Oakland, California. And I believe it was the old Examiner. It could have been the Tribune, but Handy referred to this later. And then I found it in the newspaper. He said, my moment of clarity was in Oakland, California. I went out, played a opera piece to the nines. He said, there's no better execution. He noted the great artist. He said, I was better than he was. And up in the boxes, the elites, the polite claps, down in the galley, we don't want to hear this,
Right.
And he was, and so he goes back that night, thinks about it, comes back the next night, same audience or same theater, and plays a improv piece of a Georgia camp meeting is what the song was, which was it was becoming a rag song, and it was an old ballad and all this type of stuff, and the place went crazy. And he realized, this was 1896, and by the time he got back to Quad Cities, they were letting it rip. And he came into Quad Cities, and there was a heck of a white ragtime writer, Lee Graby Orchestra, Graby. He was a German, of course, in the Tri-Cities.
Right.
And he was writing for some of the great minstrel groups already, ragtime, and he and W.C. Handy collaborated there. This was before W.C. Handy ever performed in Memphis, Tennessee.
Oh, my.
So, you know, it's
I
you
mean-
say it's combustible. It's ephemeral.
Let me ask you, what
Combustible.
what inspired you to really get into this music history? This,
Yeah, I mean, it's like you're a walking encyclopedia for
Well,
crying
yeah,
out loud.
I mean, you know this backwards and forwards.
Well, I forget a lot, and I was scared
Well,
to death.
you're
I'm real bad with pronouns. Too many games without a helmet or something, but I'm actually doing pretty good so far today. I'm remembering names, but now I really the story. You know, I spoke earlier, Charleston. I'm like, man, what is this? You know, something's going on here. This is really neat. And then, but when I get into Poplar Bluff, 1994, I was already writing for magazines. I was pretty immersed in sports writing still then, and I was but I was working on drugs by then, working on football drugs. I was freelancing. I'd left newspapers and taken the dive, and so I'm doing well. 1994, I go to a family friend's house in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and he's Bill English. And I knew him as a family friend and a former school teacher with my father in Potosi, Missouri. So go to Bill's house. It's a big football party on one of the playoff days. A bunch of people are in there. And I see this incredible black and white photo of the Beatles up there and other band. There's other musicians. They're all in suits, you know. And it's an incredible photo. So I go, man, that is a kick-ass photo. And
I know who's in that photo.
And he goes up and he points right in the middle to the guy with John Lennon's arm draped around. He said, "That's me."
Wow.
And it was Bill English, my family friend. And come to pass, in 1964, Potosi, while my brothers and I were going crazy over the Beatles and having at risk of consequences to being watched, and I'm serious, we had to sneak into the back room and watch this stuff. Dad didn't tell us he had a direct connection on the Beatles tour. I guess he didn't dare.
Wow.
And it was his former student and then teacher, Bill English, who had been hired by the Bill Black Combo on August 1st to take off on the tour with the Beatles. So I thought that was incredible. And then he tells me all this stuff about the tour. Then he says, yeah, and then we snuck away. We went down to 11 Point River on a weekend to try to hide. And the whole world ended up knowing we were out there. And I was like, man, that's great. I'm going to write a story about the Beatles in the Ozarks. And he goes, no, Janie, that ain't the story. The story is us, the Rockabillys, down in the Delta.
Wow.
And there you go.
And he said, ask George or Paul who the story is. Ask Ringo. They'll tell you who it is.
And
so that's where it really began. And then it still took me 20 years to get in a position to really attack this topic and start digging down. And so I tried to keep this simple and, tried to assure my wife that we weren't going back down, the odyssey of river riding as, I've taken her so many times. And, I was trying to say,
that didn't fly, did it?
No, it didn't, because, Tim, he says, you always have to take it back to the molecule, don't you? You can't write a story without starting with the molecule.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what happened. I'm writing about rockabilly, and I'm like, well, what the heck caused rockabilly? And so then, here I am 6 years later, and as you say, I know some things about music.
I grew up in the 50s and 60s in Blytheville, Arkansas.
Oh, fantastic.
I grew up in the 50s and 60s in Long
Mike
Island.
and all those guys.
Well, I mean, it was really, Jerry Lee Lewis.
You betcha. Yeah.
That was my hero.
The Rebel Club. And
I went to the Rebel Club.
I guarantee
yeah.
Sonny Burgess at Newport, which Porky's, I don't know if you went over there, of course that became the movie.
Yes.
A spinoff, but that's a Newport, Arkansas joint that Sonny Burgess. And
Porky's?
Yes. And that became the movie.
Like it was in Florida.
Yeah. It made it like Florida.
Yeah.
They couldn't have it in Arkansas. That would, No, that's the fact. That was a joint in Newport, Arkansas, where Elvis, Johnny Cash, all of them played.
They all played.
All played.
And I grew up on Long Island.
Long Island.
Long Island.
Long Island.
Yeah.
There's no musical influence in that place.
No, but I grew up going to disco bars.
You bet.
Yeah.
Well, that's
that's where I grew up.
Well, I was there. By the way, a friend of mine made the Jets from SEMO.
Right.
So I went to,
and I got hit on by Joe Namath.
Well,
once.
Yeah. Well, I believe.
And I turned him down.
Well, so did Susie Colbert on TV. I mean, he was kissing.
What can I tell you?
Susie Colbert.
Stockings.
That made a website that made money for kissing Susie Colbert.
Yeah. Well, can I tell you?
No, you got. I guess. You got hit on by an icon of hit-onism.
Yeah.
And
quite frankly,
let's talk about this book.
Okay, but wait a second. The big thing, I did not even know it was Joe Namath. My mother pointed it out to me.
You thought he was really just kind of a homely guy with a big nose or something.
You're right. Let's talk about your book.
Yeah.
So,
where can we find this book?
It's on Amazon, of course, The Monolith, and then it is available through my small press, Four Walls Publishing, and that's spelled out, fourwallspublishing.com. And you can contact me there, and we'll make arrangements to get it shipped to you. You can find me at cheneysblog.com. And then also, of course, Facebook, just under my name, Matt Cheney. And we'll make connections, and I'll save you a little bit off the online prices too, for sure.
All right. Are we there? We're there.
We've almost arrived.
We've almost arrived?
Man, it flies.
So time flies when you're having fun.
That's for sure.
How, I got another question for you. Have you integrated AI into what you do?
What is that? No. That acronym, I just figured that out a year or so ago. Artificial intelligence.
It's only started a year or so ago.
Yeah, it's no, I don't. As a former teacher, I think I was dealing with some artificial intelligence plagiarism by the time I got out of it. Man, I mean, these kids couldn't write a sentence, and suddenly they were prose masters.
Yeah, I understand that quite well. Absolutely.
Cell
Do I
phones
understand?
and,
Yes,
boy,
absolutely.
awful in the classroom.
Absolute. All right, stop it over there. I know what you're doing. They're counting the number of times I said absolutely. I know that's what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
oh my God. The scoreboard is going up.
Here.
All right. Thank
do
you.
that.
Thank you for tuning in to Author's Edge. Tune in again next week for more tips, resources, and your favorite conversations. Our next guest will be Ellen Gibson, and we'll be chatting with her about her book on nutrition. Till then, see you around the inkwell.
Bye.
Is that all?
Oh, Bob.
For coming and joining us today. Don't forget to get his book on the rockabilly.
You betcha. River Shows. Just remember, River Shows.
River Shows, rockabilly.
You bet.
Bye.